Good afternoon. Thank you for joining today's PPMD webinar. I'm Kathy Kinnett, PPMD Senior Vice President of Clinical Care, and we are joined today by Roche Genentech, who are joining us to provide an update on their anti-myostatin Adnectin RG6206 development program, including the status of their ongoing studies. You'll learn more about the team at Roche and its U.S. affiliate Genentech and how they're collaborating with the Duchenne community. Before we get started, please note that everyone on the call is on mute. You'll notice that there's a question and answer box on the lower left-hand side of your screen. If you have a question, please type it in, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. If possible, we'll try to save those questions until the end of the webinar. So we're joined today by several members of the Roche Genentech teams who span several countries. Our first speaker is JP Saxeter, who is someone PPMD has worked closely with over the years. JP is based in San Francisco in the Alliance and Advocacy Relations Government Affairs sector. JP leads Genentech's advocacy relations for rare disease, including Duchenne. In this role, JP leads engagement with the U.S. patient and advocacy organizations to address unmet needs in the community, partner for better outcomes, and amplify the community's voice. Prior to advocacy relations, JP was a member of Genentech Access Solutions, whose remit is to optimize access for patients and to start and stay on life-changing therapy. JP, I'll let you start off.
All right. Thank you so much, Kathy, and thanks to everyone who's joining us this afternoon and this morning. As Kathy mentioned, my name is JP Saxeter. I'm on the Alliance and Advocacy Relations team at Roche and Genentech. We're very excited to join PPMD to provide an overview and an update on our program in Duchenne and to introduce ourselves to those of you whom we haven't met. So a first point is to clarify why two names, Roche and Genentech. So please note that while there are two names, Roche and Genentech are one and the same. In the United States, Roche Pharmaceuticals is known as Genentech as a result of a merger about a decade ago. Roche is a global pharmaceutical company headquartered in Switzerland with more than 100 years of experience developing innovative therapies. Genentech is the world's first biotech or biotechnology company, but a relative neophyte with only about 40 years of developing medicines in oncology, neuroscience, and rare disease. So we're really excited to be partnering with the Duchenne community to help leverage our experience bringing those innovative medicines to patients and families, specifically in areas like Duchenne, where there's a high unmet medical need. So today we are really looking forward to first introducing ourselves and providing an update on our anti-myostatin program, which, as Kathy mentioned, we call RG6206. We'll provide an overview of the RG6206 clinical studies, the status to date and next steps. And last, we really look forward to engaging with you. So as Kathy mentioned, please submit your questions. We look forward to having a dialogue throughout, specifically at the end of this presentation. So with that, I want to hand it over to my colleagues, Sangeeta and Elena, who will share Roche and Genentech's commitment to patient partnerships, specifically in the rare disease space.
Perfect. Thank you so much, JP. And I'd like to also echo JP's thanks and gratitude to PPMD for hosting this webinar, and also to those of you from the Duchenne community who have joined to listen to this update. We're always very excited when we have an opportunity to interact with you, so thank you so much for making that possible. It's Eleanor and myself, Sangeeta, here from the Patient Partnership Group based in Basel in Switzerland. And we wanted to share with you a bit more about how we partner with the patient community and also introduce you to the program that you've heard about, RG6206 in Duchenne. So the goal of our function is to build strong and close long-term partnerships with the patient community. And essentially, we're functioning as your internal patient advocate. So working very closely together with our development teams to make sure that we can understand and also integrate what's important to you when it comes to our development programs. And we work very closely with PPMD and also with other patient organizations around the world to make sure that we can support in their efforts in advancing understanding of Duchenne, making sure that we can look for opportunities for scientific collaboration. That's really important for us, and we can make sure that we're keeping patients really at the heart of everything that we're doing. So let's start with an introduction to the program that we have in Duchenne, and then you'll hear more about the current status of this study. So the RG6206 program used to be part of Bristol Myers Squibb in early 2017, and we've now taken on fully licensing the program here at Roche. RG6206 is an anti-Myostatin Adnectin, and the phase 3 study is currently underway in boys with ambulatory Duchenne. We did earlier in the year have a pause temporarily in recruitment to this study because we had an issue with study drug availability. And we've been having questions from the community around, was this due to safety, was it due to efficacy questions, but it was not due to either of those. It was really due to a technical issue that was potentially impacting the drug availability. So that's now, we're very happy to say, resolved, and recruitment has restarted and sites are opening as planned.
Hello, so my name is Elena and I'm a Patient Partnership Director here at Roche in Basel, and I'd like to introduce you to RG6206 molecule. It is an investigational molecule that is being developed for people with Duchenne. RG6206 is designed in a way to bind a protein called myostatin and limit its function. As per study protocol, the molecule is administered at home once weekly by the injection under the skin in the tummy after an initial training at the study site. Myostatin is a target of RG6206, and it's a naturally occurring protein that is produced primarily in the skeletal muscle cells, and its function is usually to stop muscles growing too large. It has been also shown that limiting myostatin can increase muscle size, and as such, we believe that blocking myostatin could increase muscle growth and muscle strength in children with Duchenne. So this slide shows you really clinical studies that's been conducted with RG6206. The study with the N digits 2 to 5, it was a phase 1 study conducted in healthy adults, and it's been looking primarily at the safety of the molecule. The study with the digit numbers 2 to 6 has been focusing on the safety and tolerability of the molecule in ambulatory boys with Duchenne. The recruitment has been completed and 43 ambulatory boys have received this investigational molecule. The study with the N digits 2 to 7, or Spitfire, it's a study of safety, tolerability, and efficacy of the RG6206 in ambulatory boys with Duchenne. And my colleagues will tell you more about the current status of the program.
Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Michelle Krishnan. I am the clinical science lead for this project. So I'm a pediatrician and I'm a clinician scientist. And my role really is to make sure that what we're doing is right for to answer the clinical question of whether this molecule is beneficial in ambulatory boys with Duchenne in this current study. And that's the current question. And I also will be followed, I'll hand over to my colleague Mike Solomonides, and he'll introduce himself when he starts his section. So I'll start by first just recapping some of the results from the phase 1 study that Elena just mentioned. So this was a phase 1 study of this molecule in healthy adults. And so really here the purpose was to look at safety of this molecule in humans because this was the first human study. And so in healthy adults there was weekly dosing subcutaneously, so same as for your boys with Duchenne. And this study aimed to look at safety and tolerability, as I mentioned, and it achieved that. It also wanted to look at whether the drug is doing what we expect it to do. So as Elena mentioned, myostatin is an inhibitor of muscle growth that occurs naturally in the body. and the RG6206 molecule inhibits the activity of myostatin. So we wanted to see whether there was a decrease in free myostatin as we expected with the drug, and that was observed. So the drug does what was expected. And it was also looked at in that study whether multiple doses would have an effect on muscle growth. So one of the expectations is that this drug should support muscle growth. And it was seen in this study that after multiple doses, there were increases observed in the size of the thigh muscle and in the total lean body mass. And there was a very careful assessment of side effects and safety, as in all of our studies. And in this study, the most common side effects were skin redness or a rash at the injection site, and also upper respiratory tract infection, so chest or throat. But all of these were mild or moderate. And so that was very encouraging. The phase 2 study, so this is a phase 1b/2, which is just a technical aspect, and this is in boys with Duchenne. So this is a study that some of you may know as 006. So this was now transitioned under the Roche number of 226. And so this is, as Eleanor mentioned, we've completed recruitment of all the boys some time ago, and they're all well into the open label period of this study. So this is a study where we have currently ambulatory boys with Duchenne aged 5 to 10 years old. And over 24 weeks, there was a double-blind period where they received a weekly dose of either the drug or placebo, and nobody on the study would know what they were allocated to. This was, and then now they've rolled over into an open-label period. So that means that they will all be receiving active drug, and everybody is aware of that. And we presented some data, so I presented some data on this study initially at the British Pediatric Neurology Association conference, which was at the start of this year. And I'll just summarize some of those results for you. So this is an analysis based on a first look at the data, so it's an interim analysis, looking at data at 24 weeks. So this was during the double-blind period, which, as I mentioned, is where there is an allocation to either placebo or active treatment. And we looked at various things in this study, and there's quite extensive imaging of the boys. So they have two types of imaging. One is DEXA, which you can see in the image at the top, and there you can see the whole body. And that looks at how much muscle there is in the body. And then the other imaging they had was MRI, and that was looking at the right thigh, so specifically looking at the thigh. And what you see there in that sort of circle, that's basically a cross-section of the thigh. So if you were looking basically into the thigh. And you can see different muscles that are outlined there. And so we looked at, with the image at the top, we look at the lean body mass. And with the image at the bottom, the MRI, we looked at the contractile muscle. So that means the amount of muscle that is expected to be functional and active, and then non-contractile tissue, which are other types of tissue that could be around, and that could be fat or other types of connective tissue. So the primary endpoint of this study, which is very important to emphasize, was safety and tolerability in boys with Duchenne, as this is also the first study using this molecule in this population. And at 24 weeks, the safety profile was very encouraging, so no clinically significant safety concerns, including injection site reactions, which are, of course, of great interest to everyone, and also in terms of So what it says there is immunogenicity, so meaning antibodies or a reaction of the body to the drug. So it did not generate an immune reaction that was dangerous to the boys, and there were no significant safety concerns identified. So encouraging from that point of view, and that was the focus of the study. Another important point for us to clarify was, as I said also for the adult study, whether the drug was doing what it was expected to do in terms of suppressing the level of free myostatin. As you know, just because a drug does something in adults doesn't mean that it will do the same in children. And there was a lot of work around modeling how it would behave in children. And this study has shown that the drug is doing what it was expected to do in terms of suppression of free myostatin. And in terms of the imaging, which I sort of mentioned to you at the beginning, looking at both the DEXA, lean body mass, and looking at the MRI, there was suggestion of a positive effect on muscle mass, so in terms of muscle growth and muscle composition. And this was, these are preliminary findings, as I mentioned. These were suggestive findings. In terms of effect on function, this was a small study. So as I mentioned, there were 43 boys originally enrolled. And really, with that number of boys, it's not really possible to really ask the question of whether there's a direct impact on function because there's just too few boys in the study in total. However, we took a look at this in any case because obviously it's of high interest and very important to everyone. So in terms of direct effect of the drug on function, at 24 weeks, there was no significant change in function in the treatment groups compared to placebo. So what that means is that in this group, at this time point, which is obviously also very early, so this was just 6 months of treatment, and so it was not possible to observe a direct effect of the drug on function, and that was with tests that you're very familiar with, so timed function tests including 4-step climb and 10-meter walk run, 6-minute walk distance. And so, as I mentioned, we weren't really expecting to be able to see anything on this in this study, and you can see that the numbers there are in that final point. So there were 11 boys on placebo, and the smallest group of active was 6 boys, and the largest group was 19 boys who were on active. And so that's why we're running currently the 227 study, which was previously known as 016 under BMS. And so that phase 3 study is larger, and it will be running for longer. And that's where we hope to really be able to address this question of whether RG6206 could have an impact on function for boys, ambulatory boys with Duchenne. And so this is a brief overview of this phase 3 study, which I've just mentioned. So a phase 3 study really is one that is aiming to look at efficacy. And what we mean by efficacy is that it should have a direct impact on the endpoints, so the clinical measures that are meaningful and where the drug has a direct impact on that. So it is placebo-controlled, as is required, and we have a 2-to-1 randomization. So there's actually twice the opportunity to be on active treatment versus placebo, as we have 2 doses in this study, and so there's a 2-to-1 chance of being on active rather than placebo. And after 48 weeks, which is roughly a year, there will be a transition to an open label where everybody will be aware of what they're on, and they will all be on active treatment. And those are the current plans. And what I should mention, which is applicable to both this study and also the previous study that that I described, is that all boys should also be on corticosteroids on a stable regimen for the entire study. They should be ambulatory, as I mentioned at the start, and there are a number of other inclusion criteria that, in general, we would always encourage you to discuss with your local investigator for further details on that. So for the phase 3, these are the primary objective is the main thing that we're aiming to show, and then there are secondary objectives which are considered thereafter. So at the moment, so this is a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study, as I've described in other words. And the primary objective is to look at change from baseline, so from the point that they're screened up until the end of the primary assessment period, so when the double-blind period finishes. So a change from baseline to the end of the double-blind period in their four-stair climb velocity, so that's the speed rather than the time. So four-stair climb velocity at week 48 in the active group versus placebo-treated participants. And then there are a number of secondary objectives, and those include other functional assessments and myometry and other additional endpoints. And of course, we always continue to monitor safety, and we always will continue to monitor adverse events, and that's just throughout all the studies as a requirement. So a little bit more of the detail of the inclusion and exclusion, just to kind of address that. So one important aspect and benefit of the RG6206 molecule is that all mutations that are well described in Duchenne are eligible. So this is not a mutation-specific therapy. The diagnosis of Duchenne should, of course, be confirmed by your clinician and also by genotyping. Boys should be able to walk without assistance. The age here is 6 to 11. So for those of you who are eagle-eyed, you would have noticed that that's a little bit different from the previous study. So 6 to 11 here. And they should be on corticosteroids, as I mentioned, and they need to have a four-stair climb of less than 8 seconds at screening. I think the exclusion criteria are also, I think, fairly clear. So if there's a cognitive aspect that would actually make it difficult for that boy to take part, or if they were taking medications like androgens or human growth hormone, if they have breathing difficulties that require a ventilator use, and also, of course, because, as Elena mentioned, that this is an injection under the skin, so if the boy wasn't able to actually receive the medication that way, of course, they wouldn't be able to take part. So I will now hand over to my colleague, Mike, and look forward to your questions at the end.
Thank you. So I'm Mike Solomonides. I'm the operations leader at Roche. So I'm responsible for the operational planning, the setup, the conduct, and the oversight of the studies. And I'm just going to give you a quick overview of where the studies are running and a quick and an update on the status. So on the current slide, it shows that the study is a global study running in 13 countries, and screening has started in Japan. And we're currently activating sites in those countries, and screening is expected to resume and start in Canada and Australia in May, and in Europe in June, and in Argentina in June or July.
Mike, you keep cutting in and out, so we can't hear what you're saying. I'm sorry.
So perhaps we were just thinking maybe we could move to the Q&A, and we can give Mike some time to maybe dial in from a different line, and then I'm sure if questions come up that he can speak to, that we will we'll pick that up. Does that seem like a plan?
Sure. That sounds like a great plan. So We'll start off. There was a question about the participants in phase 2. Will those boys who participated in phase 2 be eligible to join the placebo group or the active group in phase 3?
Yes, so thank you for that question, and I may have not been entirely clear on how the two studies connect. So the phase 2 study, so 226, that's completed enrollment. So all those boys are on active treatment. So they're all receiving drug now. So that study is still ongoing. So boys are still actually active. They are a part of that study, but they are in the open label part. So they're all receiving active drug. Whereas the phase 3 study, 227, is starting enrollment with a new cohort of boys. So this is fresh enrollment that's starting from now onwards. So they're actually separate cohorts.
Okay, so you won't include any of the boys who are on active drug, regardless of dose, in that dose cohort for phase 3. They'll remain their own cohort in the extension phase, right?
Correct, yeah, and they are receiving active drug at the moment, so that's so they are a separate cohort.
Okay, and are you continuing to monitor those participants who are continuing to get active drug from phase 2?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. We are monitoring them both for the assessments that were part of the study in terms of the function tests, but also they are also having some imaging and also safety. So the schedule is less intense than for the double-blind periods, but we do monitor them for the entire time.
Okay. Are you able to say or to give any of the percentages regarding average decline in myostatin?
Oh, decline in myostatin. Yes. So we have very good activity of the drug. So the levels of myostatin decline or suppression that we're achieving are above 90%. So that's a very high level of suppression that is achieved very stably with the drug. Okay.
And were you able to monitor pulmonary or bone or cardiac outcomes in phase 2? And do you plan to do that in phase 3 at all?
Yes. So we have in the phase 3 and the phase 2 we have ECG and echo, and at some sites we have also cardiac MRI. And those are part of the additional endpoints in the study. So we will be looking at that.
And those are for phase 3, but those weren't evaluated in phase 2. Is that correct?
In the phase 2, we did also have those cardiac aspects. So we have ECG and echo. And I'm just double checking regarding the cardiac MRI because that was done at certain sites. So I believe that for the phase 2 that we had ECG and echo.
And were you able to report on the impact of this molecule on the heart or the lungs or the bones?
So far, in terms of the cardiac and lung function tests, we are still looking at the data that are coming in, and we've focused at the moment on the more related to the ambulatory aspects, so the time function tests. So that's work that's in progress. So we will report on those. I can't give you an answer on that today, but that's something that we will report in the course of as the data's coming out.
Okay. So the inclusion criteria for the phase 3 includes stable doses of steroids. Is there a period of time that the stable dose needs to be in place, and does it matter if it's prednisone or deflazacort and Emflaza?
So regarding the type of steroids, no, we are open to different types. So it can be either it can be any of those types. And they do, so in terms of being on a stable dose, so we hope that basically that the local investigators should be following the same the guidelines across, which should be the same across the US. And we would hope that they would have a stable dose for at least 6 months prior to the start of the study, with no significant change in dose for at least 3 months prior to the study drug. So they need to have been on steroids for at least 6 months, with a stable dose for at least 3 months prior to the study drug. Of course, changes that are related to body weight as the boys are growing, that's absolutely fine. And there are details in the protocol for the investigators to have a look at the range there.
Okay, great, thanks. Is EXONDYS 51 an exclusion for participating in this study?
Currently it is. The study, as some of you may be aware, this program has actually been running for some time, and things have changed while the program has been running. And I think in terms of us ensuring that the group of boys that are in the study is as uniform as possible, in the sense that, of course, we all know that Duchenne is a highly variable disease, and we're doing our best to try and make sure that we can answer the question of anti-myostatin as clearly as possible. And so when the study was designed, EXONDYS 51 wasn't yet approved, and so it's not really built into the design of the study at present. And so for us to really try and have as clear an answer as possible for families on this specific question, we are focusing just on anti-myostatin at the moment. So it would be an exclusion criteria. Yeah.
All right, thanks. Mike, are you back on the line?
Yes, I'm back. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We're going to let you take over, and then we'll head back to questions when you complete. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, sorry for that interruption. So I'll just start on the first slide again. I've just got 2 slides. So it's a global study with 13 countries, and we are currently screening in both the US and Japan. And other countries will start screening very shortly. So Canada and Australia will start screening by the end of May. And in Europe, we expect screening will start in June. And we have one site in Argentina that will start a little bit later. And that's actually related to the health authority process, which is the longest in Argentina. And if I can go to the next slide, that's working. Perfect. So this slide shows that we have 18 sites in the US, and as of last week, 9 of those sites highlighted in green. They were open and activated, and in fact several of them have already screened patients in the last few weeks. As of today, we have 1 more, so we have 10 out of those 18 sites that are activated, and the remaining sites, the majority, if not all of them, are expected to be activated by the end of May or very shortly afterwards. So we actually had a very good, excellent meeting in the US with the North American sites and the investigators last week, where everybody was very motivated and keen and ready to start. And we're also very excited to be working on this important study. And so I just wanted to, thank you for your interest and also look forward to answering any questions. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks. There was a question about inclusion age. Is it 5 to 11 inclusive, or is it 5 and 10 years and 11 months, or what exactly is the inclusion?
Yeah, sorry, it can be a bit confusing. So 6. So as soon as they turn 6, they're eligible, and then as soon as they turn 12, they're no longer eligible. So up to 12 is fine. So as soon as they have their 12th birthday, that would be outside of the inclusion range.
Okay. And boys who are in the open label who are receiving drugs, at this moment? If they stop walking, are they continuing to receive drug, or
yes, absolutely,
is that being discontinued? Okay.
No, yeah, and they would continue. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, and I think with your inclusion and screening criteria, there isn't much risk that boys may stop walking during the trial in phase 3, right?
Yeah, we expect that there will be a low, with this age range, it would be unusual, but that's it. Yeah, you're right. That's what we expect.
Okay,
and Pat, I just wanted to add a clarification to earlier. So a couple of things. So regarding, as I mentioned, because things are changing so rapidly in the Duchenne therapy landscape, we're having various conversations about how to adapt the study. And so I just wanted to clarify that actually we've recently been discussing about a washout period for Exondys 51, and we came to the conclusion that although the focus is, of course, that we want to look at steroids and anti-myostatin in this study, but it's really we would allow a washout period of 6 months and then after so if they were on Exondys 51, they could then have a 6-month washout and then switch into our study, but and for ataluren as well. But what I would encourage people is that if there are specific questions and if people have specific examples that they would like to discuss, that the best point of call would be with their investigator, because with these we're going to have to look at them case by case, and so I think the message there is that it's a changing landscape. We're trying to be as flexible as we can, but of course we have to try and keep the study focused on anti-myostatin so that we can give everybody an answer. So if there are specific individuals who would like to discuss their case further, that the first port of call would be their investigator, and then if the investigator would like to contact us, we can then review that case individually.
And those investigators can be found on the U.S. website, clinicaltrials.gov. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
okay.
right.
Excellent.
And
so there's a question about... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
This is Carl Yen, Global Development Team Leader here at Basel. Just further clarification on ataluren. So the protocol does specify that with ataluren, it's a 12-week washout period prior to the start of the study drug administration. So a bit shorter period than the 6 months for exon skipping therapies. But just in case there's a question about gene therapy, concomitant or current or any previous participation in a gene therapy study would be grounds for exclusion from the study. So they can't have been in a gene therapy study and enter our study.
Okay, so the absolute exclusions are gene therapy and growth hormone. And for Exondys 51, it's a 6-month washout, and for ataluren, it's a 12-week washout, right?
Correct. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. There's a question about how myostatin actually strengthens existing muscle. So do you anticipate that you'll see strengthened existing muscle in addition to an increase in lean body muscle mass as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. The idea is that myostatin it prevents excessive muscle growth under usual circumstances. So the expectation and what has been seen when looking at the muscle in the preclinical, so in mouse and other animal experiments, is that it actually grows the muscle itself. So we would hope that it boosts the strength, the volume and the strength of the existing muscles. There may be some effects on fibrosis. That's something that we are keeping an eye on. And just to mention around other types of muscle in the body, that we expect that the most effect will be on skeletal muscle. So that's what's in the arms and legs, and that would be and around potentially some of the breathing muscles as well, like the intercostal muscles, could be the most the ones that respond the most.
Okay. And you are looking at heart, which you mentioned. Are there outcome measures that you're looking at for pulmonary function as well?
Yes. So something that I should add to that previous question is that we've had a very clear. So in terms of safety, we have continuously been looking at the pulmonary, so the lung and the cardiac function of all the boys, and that's been very clean the whole way through. So we haven't had any issues with any cardiac or lung function from a safety perspective. And so what we can come back to you with as we look further into the data is whether there's actually any trends in changes over time in terms of benefit from drug. So just to clarify that point. And in terms of lung function tests, we do definitely have a number of lung function tests, which include the FVC, FEV1. There's quite a list of them, and in fact we've been working to rationalize these, as in reduce the total number based on feedback from families and evaluators in the 226 study, so in the phase 2 study, because there was actually quite a lot of lung assessments in there, and they were finding it quite burdensome. So we've actually had discussions with the evaluators and the investigators and the families, and we've removed some of the additional tests that we felt were not really essential for this study, and so there's still a number of them in there, but they're the ones that we think are more relevant to this population.
Okay, thanks. In addition to enabling an increase in lean body mass and muscle and skeletal muscle mass, do you know if there are any protective factors from your molecule on the muscle that may prevent the loss of CK into the blood or decrease the CK level?
That's an interesting question. We are looking at the CK level, so we haven't done that explicit comparison as yet, but that's a really that's something that we do have data for. We haven't seen any safety flags in terms of increases in CK or any that would be out of keeping with the baseline for that individual. So it's been reassuring from that side. But in terms of whether it actually has a beneficial impact on the level of CK, that's something we can look into.
Thanks. In addition to increasing muscle, have you looked at fatigue or energy level in any of your patients? We've heard that fatigue and energy are a specific concern of many patients. So with increased muscle, you would hope that there is increased energy as well. Have you been able to look at that at all?
So Pat, that's a super important question that we've been discussing just very recently, because for those if there are people already enrolled in the study who are on the call, as you know, it's not currently part of the design, but we have been having some discussions with investigators about adding the PEDS-QOL fatigue module potentially to the study, which would be trying to capture that side of things, and also there's an assessment in the study, which is the Anti-Myo device that people may know. So it's a device that's a wearable, that's digital and records activity, and we may be able to just keep an eye on the levels of activity for that individual throughout the study, and to see whether they're actually more active. And there's a couple of other things that are work in progress. So, but that are focusing on trying to capture more of this side of fatigue and what can people notice at home that is important in terms of a change in the level of activity, and how we can capture that. So that's something that's really at the front of our minds. and that we're trying to be open about making additions to the study where possible, and not adding burden to people. So there's a couple of things on the table that we will add to capture that a bit better.
Well, that's really exciting. Thanks. It's going to be nice to see some real-time data in addition to clinical outcomes, right?
Yes.
Great. Will you take into consideration supplements that some of the boys are using, or foods that some of the boys are eating?
Not explicitly at the moment. We are allowing, so we have discussions, again, case by case with investigators on specific additional medications that people might be on, or specific supplements. We look at it case by case at the moment, and it's really a mixed bag. So these are actually specific questions that one could ask, and in a way, the studies should be designed specifically to look at these questions. So I think it'll be interesting to see whether there are any, trends within the group later. But since the design isn't really kind of focused on trying to ensure that those things are all standardized, it makes it difficult for us to really be able to make comparisons within the study. But we certainly do keep a track of all the additional medications that boys are on as part of the study.
Excellent. So there's a question about the limiting factors for long-term treatment, but I would assume that as you've found no safety indications for this drug, that maybe you don't have any long-term limiting factors. Have you thought about that, or are there any concerns that you might have for people that are on this drug for years and years?
Oh, I see. Do you mean that if there would be an issue with long-term use?
Yes.
Okay. So to date, absolutely not. So we have individuals who have been on this drug now. So boys with Duchenne coming up to 2 years of being on drug, where we have no safety signals at all. And so we continue to monitor, and that's part of the work of the open label, and why the open label is also so important for people to remain engaged with, because it does give that long-term safety information that is then crucial if and when there is approval of the drug and people are looking at going on, a long-term treatment. So that's information that we're gathering.
Excellent. Do you know what the longest period of time is that one of the patients have been on in the extension phase?
Yes, I think it's coming up to 2 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we were just at the investigator
data.
meeting in the US with our investigators there the other week, and one of them was saying that she has a patient who's coming up to 2 years. So.
Excellent. Okay, I think that we've gone through all the questions.
So we had, I think there was one question that had come, maybe that was, can you estimate when you might feel ready to go to the FDA with this drug? So, Carl, I don't know if you wanted to speak to that at all.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, right now it's just an estimate, but what's listed in clinicaltrials.gov has the trial finishing in mid-2020. So we would seek to speak with the health authorities, including the FDA, as soon as possible, assuming the data are encouraging, which would usually be within a few months after that. So that's the best we can estimate at this point, is probably sometime late 2020.
Good. If we don't have any other questions, is there anything that you would like to say in summary, your team?
So I think in summary, thank you so much again for the opportunity to present this update with you. And thank you most of all to all of you from the community who are taking part in clinical trials. We understand that that's a huge burden for yourselves, for your family, for your boys, more importantly. And we're very grateful that your contribution is helping to advance science in Duchenne. we're looking forward to seeing many of you at the Duchenne, at the PPMD conference coming up, and also all of the smaller family meetings, the local meetings where we'll have opportunities to meet many of you face to face. So thank you again. Please do reach out if you have questions. You can also consult our website where you can find information about the studies there as well.
Thank you so much. If you, as the Roche Genentech team has said, this webinar will be recorded, or it has been recorded and will be archived on the PPMD website. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to PPMD. Please feel free to reach out to the Roche Genentech team, and we'll be happy to help you in any way that we can. So thanks again so much for you guys being on. This has been great. It's been really informative, and we wish you all the best with this study.
And thanks, Kathy, for a great job moderating. We really appreciate it.